He had everything: money, power, and control. But what happens when a man believes he's untouchable? This is the story of a tyrant who pushed too far, taking what wasn't his, crushing those who stood in his way, until the very power he abused turned against him. Stay with me, because the ending will shock you.
Thomas Gray was a man who seemed untouchable. To Oakridge, he was a symbol of success, the politician with the perfect smile and the polished speeches. He was the man who shook hands with the poor, hugged their children, and promised a brighter future. People believed in him. They trusted him. At home, his wife Margaret stood proudly beside him, and his teenage daughter Claire adored him. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect family. But behind the closed doors of their mansion, Thomas ruled with coldness. His ambition left little room for love. His eyes were always set on the next position, the next land to seize, the next law to bend. The moment that would begin his fall came quietly. James Harrison, a humble farmer, owned a piece of fertile land that had been in his family for generations. That land fed his children, carried his history, and symbolized his hope. James begged him, "Please, Mr. Gray, this land is all I have. My children, my grandchildren, they depend on it." But Thomas, with his chilling smile, simply said, "Everything has a price, and if you can't pay mine, you have nothing." He signed the papers, and the Harrisons were left with nothing but heartbreak. Thomas thought the matter was over, but whispers spread. Rumours about his greed grew louder. His allies, once eager to stand by him, began to distance themselves. People in Oakridge muttered that his downfall was near, though none dared speak it to his face. What Thomas didn't know was that James Harrison had prayed that night an anguished prayer that justice would come, that the spirits of their land would not rest until truth was revealed. From that day forward, Thomas's life began to unravel in ways he couldn't explain. It began with his wife, Margaret. She no longer looked at him with pride. She would sit silently during dinners, her eyes filled with disappointment. "What kind of man are you becoming?" she once whispered, but Thomas ignored her. Then came Claire, his daughter, his pride. She found files in his study documents showing not just the Harrison land, but dozens of other properties stolen through deception. She confronted him, tears in her eyes. "Dad, is this who you really are?" Thomas roared back, his voice shaking the house. "Everything I've done for this family." But Claire saw the truth. He wasn't protecting them, he was destroying everything they stood for. The final storm came when evidence leaked to the press. Documents, testimonies, and secret recordings filled the airwaves. Reporters surrounded his mansion. Former allies lined up against him. Court summons arrived at his doorstep. Thomas Gray, once hailed as Oakridge's hero, was now its villain. In his desperation, he tried to hold on to power. He still clung to the Harrison land, refusing to let go. "This is mine," he hissed, as if the soil itself belonged to him. But the harder he clung, the faster everything slipped away. It wasn't the courts or the politicians who finally broke him, it was his family. Margaret packed her things and left. Claire, his daughter, moved in with her aunt. She stood in front of the cameras and said, "The man you all thought you knew is not the father I remember. He chose greed over love." Those words shattered what little dignity Thomas had left. Alone in his mansion, he wandered the halls like a ghost. The phone calls stopped, the friends vanished. The power that once filled him with pride now left him empty. One morning, he walked to the Harrison land, staring at the soil he had stolen. His body was weak, his mind tormented by guilt and shadows of the past. For the first time, he wept not for his power, but for the man he had become. Days later, he was found lifeless in his study. A heart attack, they said, but the people of Oakridge believed it was justice for every family he had wronged. When news spread of his death, the town did not mourn. No bells rang, no tears were shed. Instead, the Harrisons returned to their land. Families who had lost property found new hope. And Oakridge learned a lesson it would never forget. Power built on lies and greed may rise high, but it always falls harder. Thomas Gray's name lived on not as a man of honor, but as a cautionary tale whispered for generations.